Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Kroll, and this is the second of 4 videos on the pillars of lifestyle medicine. And in this video, we will talk about physical activity. And the good news is the focus of this message is not necessarily structured, intense exercise, but just moving more and sitting less. I think the biggest improvements in health can be made by going from doing nothing to doing something. And of course, the message is that some is better than none, but then also more is better than some. But the focus is just getting started. And if you're already moving, then how to optimize it for your best health. So it's often said that the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door, just making the point that you just need to get started. So you've also probably heard the expression that sitting is the new smoking. And that's not just an expression. There is some scientific validity for that. Because in medicine, when we're trying to rate things in terms of their effectiveness in actually improving health, we tend to look at um, experiments that have been done where you compare the highest level to the lowest level of something. For example, with smoking, it's well known and proven that smokers compared to non-smokers have 3 to 4 times the likelihood of death in a given year. Now, of course, that worsens over time. If you're in your 30s and 40s and you smoke, you're 3 to 4 times as likely to die in the next year as someone who doesn't. That is a low risk, and you quadruple it, and it's still a low risk, but over time, that risk gets bigger. The same thing holds with being sedentary. People who are sedentary have 4 to 5 times the likelihood of death within the next year as people who are regularly physically active. So if you're in your 30s and 40s and you're sedentary, 5 times the risk of death in the next year is still a very low number. But as you get older, that gets exponentially bigger. So you get the point. We need to move more and sit less. So in this video, I hope to review with you a fairly complex topic in a simplified manner, and that is just the whole idea of our daily energy expenditure. It's important that you understand that in some simplified terms. And then we'll talk about the different types of exercise. We will review some very important concepts about what exercise does, but what it also does not do. And then we'll talk about what the components of a healthy exercise prescription are, and then summarize everything. So let's start by talking about calories or daily energy expenditure. It's a very often oversimplified topic, and it just creates confusion. People look at energy expenditure like we are a combustible engine, where the energy of the fuel that you put in the engine is exactly the same as the energy that the engine burns. Our bodies are way too complex. They simply don't work that way. So the total amount of calories that our body burns each day are the sum of many different things. So the first part, the biggest part of it, is our resting energy expenditure, just the energy that our body needs to exist. And this is the calories that we would burn if we sat in a temperature controlled room in a bubble where there were no germs and we just breathed. That's the resting energy expenditure. But on top of that, you have to add the calories that our body burns to keep our immune system going, to regulate our temperature. Just the act of digesting our food requires calories. And there are several other things our body does to maintain our balance that require energy. And all those go into the formula. On top of that, you have to add the activity that we do every day that's not exercise. Walking to and from the mailbox, to our car, tapping our foot on the ground, tapping our pencil on the desk. Anything we do that involves movement, that is non-exercise activity, energy expenditure. On top of that, you have to add the fact that to use the energy that's in our food, we have to expend energy. You have to use energy to make energy. And that's above the process of digestion. I just mean taking the carbs, fat, and protein and breaking it down into energy requires energy. And on top of that, then you can add the exercise activity itself. So many people talk about calories as if you get more than 500 per day than what you need, you gained a pound a week. And if you're counting your calories and you have a 500 calorie deficit per day, that you're gonna lose a pound per week. It doesn't work that way. That doesn't mean that calories in, calories out doesn't apply. Of course it does. It just means there are so many variables that go into how much energy our body burns that are not accounted for, that you can't oversimplify it by talking about the calories that you ate and the calories you burned with exercise. So this will be more clear later and more important when I talk about the things that exercise does and does not do. So now we'll talk about the different types of activity, whether we're talking about just moving more and sitting less or actual structured exercise. And the first area is aerobic activity, which generally refers to those activities where we get our heart rate up a little bit, maybe breathe a little harder. And that could simply be walking briskly, or actually running or swimming. Next is muscle strengthening, which is very important to maintain our lean muscle mass throughout our adult life, not only so that we have good metabolic health, but also to avoid getting more wear and tear on our skeleton and things start wearing down and we're at risk for falls later. And balance, which is equally as important in preventing falls later in life. And then lastly, flexibility is very important to address, because as our muscles and tendons, ligaments get stiffer, then we're more prone to injuring ourselves just from turning suddenly to grab something. And a lot of the falls have to do with impaired flexibility as well. So it's important to address all four areas, not just for optimal health today, but for optimal lifespan. So it's easier to start by talking about the beneficial things that exercise does. And the most important of all of them is the fact that being active actually improves our metabolic health. It improves our cells' ability to use nutrients, glucose and fat. It improves the function of our mitochondria. So you can always use your fat more easily when you're active regularly. And this is what leads to the prevention or reversal of diabetes, and also reduces risk of heart attack, stroke, and cancer, which are the three single greatest causes of premature death. But being active also improves our bone health, because putting a strain on our bones stimulates them to grow stronger and reduces bone loss. And as we talked before, being active also improves muscle strength, which is critical. But it also is helpful to improve our mood when we're active regularly, not only directly through the adrenaline or endorphin release, but also by improving our sleep. Our mood indirectly gets better, which we'll talk more about in the sleep pillar. So lastly, I really want to set the record straight on the things that exercise does not do. And the most important thing to say would be that exercise doesn't really give you extra calories burned so that you can then eat more. I think many people do use exercise in that way. And there's very important reason for you to understand as to why that's not true. As I explained earlier, the calories that our body burns over the day are the sum total of many different things. So while you are burning calories exercising, your body is burning less calories in all those other areas I told you about. There's no calories burned for digestion. There's less calories burned for regulating temperature. Even calories to regulate immune function, they're all turned down while we're exercising for very good reason. And so at the end of the day, it turns out, if you go burn, say, 500 calories with exercise, the total amount of calories you burn for the day may only go up by, say, 50 or 100 because of the reduced energy expenditure in some of those other functions. So That is critical for you to realize if you're, say, counting calories, that an extra 500 calories burned with exercise doesn't give you an extra 500 calories for the day. So you can't rely on that caloric burn to then consume more. So I'm really trusting you to take the true message that I'm trying to deliver there. I don't want you to say, well, then what's the point? Because of all the other things I told you that exercise does do and how critical it is for maintaining your metabolic health, using nutrients better, allowing you to burn fat better. All those things are very important. But you do not actually burn significantly more calories over the course of the day as a result of doing exercise. So I hope that's clear. So in summary, and kind of as a wrap up for these first two pillars, the main way that we feel better today, improve our quality of life years and our lifespan in general, is to prevent or reverse chronically elevated insulin, inflammation, and cortisol. And these first two pillars, nutrition and physical activity, are the main way that we reverse and or prevent the chronically elevated insulin and the chronically elevated inflammation. So you cannot hope, if you're honest with yourself, to have reasonable quality of life or life expectancy without being physically active on a regular basis, moving more and sitting less, and restricting or eliminating all the ultra-processed foods, added sugars from the diet. So again, at this point, please be sure to engage with your primary care physician to get an exercise or activity prescription for you, considering the individual aspects of your health, any conditions you have, and physical abilities, and to make sure that your exercise prescription is going to be safe for you. So my next video, before we get to the third and fourth pillars, is a little bit of what I call some bonus content for those who are looking to take a little deeper dive on the aspects of nutrition and exercise, to kind of go all in on doing absolutely everything you can to optimize health span and lifespan. So I hope at this point you're well into the journey on optimizing nutrition, and you'll take some of the information presented in this video to make sure that you're optimizing physical activity and exercise. So until then, be well.